DPNs, what's that? These are double-pointed needles, and they're made for knitting things in the round. And they're not as scary as they seem. Today, we're going to work on an easy cast-on and work up this fantastic fingerless mitt by Kristen. Welcome to GoodKnit Kisses. We're all about helping you stitch your love and love your stitches. This is the fourth video in a series of how to read a pattern. Today, we'll concentrate on knitting in the round on double-pointed needles. The other books range from a basic hat on straight needles, working a cable or twist, and lace knitting from a chart. Be sure and download the book by clicking on the link in the description below. Let's go over your supplies. Today's yarn is Lion Brand Landscapes. It's a medium 4-weight yarn. You need 1 skein. This is color Desert Spring. Thank you so much, Lion Brand. You are also going to need 5-inch double-pointed needles, a set of 5, size US 8 or 5 millimeter. I'm actually using a US size 10 or 6 millimeter to make them big enough for these hands. You're also going to need a split ring marker, some scissors, and a tapestry needle. And if you want to measure out your gauge, you're going to need a measuring tape or knitting gauge. Let's begin. The fingerless mitts pattern is an easy plus pattern. And of course, you know your supplies. Your gauge is 2 repeats, which is 8 stitches wide, and 12 rounds, which is actually 1 3/4 of an inch wide. The way you get that is you can work a small little swatch with 14 stitches across. It is worked in a flat panel, so you can test out some of the specialty stitches with that. We're not going to make this swatch on camera here. I'm actually going to dive right in and teach you how to cast on in the round. Let's flip over to the next page. This pattern starts on page 28 in the book or ebook. We'll flip over here and we start with the bottom ribbing section. So we do the cast on, and I'll work 1 whole round with you to show you how to work all 5 needles. You see 4 needles used here, but you're always going to have a free 5th needle that stitches get loaded from 1 full needle over to the empty one, and then it just keeps rotating. So that's kind of the basic premise around that. Then we will work the main stitch pattern, which is a 4-round repeat, and then you'll repeat that a certain number of times. And then we will work the first part of the thumb. And then we'll come to binding off in pattern for the top of the ribbing. I'll give you some instruction in between so that you know how the pattern is running. And then we'll come back and we'll pick up thumb stitches that we bound off before and show you how to complete that. So there's essentially 6 parts to this video. Be sure and click down below to find more information and videos that are slower if you're missing some of these techniques in your own stitch vocabulary. All right, let's begin. So for casting on DPNs, you generally use all of them that are spelled out in the pattern less 1, because 1 is going to be a free and empty one. So we just take whatever our stitches are and divide them among the 3 or the 4 that's called out in the pattern. In this case, we're doing 5 needles, so we're going to cast on 4 needles, and we're going to divide our stitches among those. This pattern is calling for 33. I'm actually going to do a cast on with just 32. You don't need that extra stitch for what I'm doing. We're going to put 8 stitches on the first needle, and we're using the long tail cast on, which most people are familiar with. So go ahead and pull out your yarn. I'm doing about 1.5 yards. I'm going to make my slip knot, and then we'll just place that right on that needle. And I'll have a video slower if you are unfamiliar with the long tail cast on, and it'll be down below. We'll do the first couple of stitches together and then pause your video as you need. So we're going to make sure the tail is towards you and the ball is towards the back. Going to grab that with our opposite hand and split those 2 strands. We're going to scoop up through where the thumb part is. So scoop up here, go down where the finger is, and then down at the thumb and let it go. And we've got 2 stitches on our needle. We're going to go ahead and do that again. Scoop up through the thumb, down through the finger, down at the thumb, and let it go. I've got 3 stitches on there. Go ahead and get the rest of your stitches, 8 for me. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now that you've got those on there, you can clearly see that there's a nice little ridge. And we're going to take advantage of that ridge, and this is going to help us in casting on all of our stitches and then making it to where it doesn't twist, and you'll see that later on. So go ahead and hold on to that, and with your free hand, pick up the next needle, and lay it right on that ridge and leave the yarn hanging at the back. So just hold on to it right there. Just grab those needles together. We're going to pick up our yarn just as we did before with the tail towards you still, and cast on that first empty needle just like that using the tip. Slide it all the way to the back and kind of tug on that to make it nice and taut, nice and snug. And these stitches are now very close together. So the last stitch from our first needle and the first stitch from our second needle, you want nice and snug. Go ahead and do that again. All right, so now those first two stitches are nice and snug on there. And we're just going to keep holding on to both at the same time. This is very important. You can slide your hand down if you need to, and finish casting on all 8 of your stitches. And if you use a different yarn and needle, you need a different gauge, just divide up however many stitches you need evenly and do that many. And one more here. And I do have a roving yarn here, and I did frog this a little bit, so it's a little hairier than usual, so disregard that. All right, so we've got 8 on here, and we want to pick up the next needle. So just using our free hand, put the next one on this ridge here. I'm just going to hold that in your other hand, just like the other ones. Put it slightly forward, and go ahead and cast on again. Make those first couple of stitches nice and snug, making sure that we're not leaving a gap between the 2 needles. That's very important. We want to make sure those are nice and connected. Finish casting on, and then we'll do that on our last needle as well. So pause your video as you need. Slide that needle down if you need more room. And last needle. Keep holding on. Do not let them drop. Okay, so now that we have all of our stitches, we're going to lay this down, and you can now cut this this yarn here, the extra amount from your tail, just to about 6 inches or so. Okay, so now we're going to look at our stitches here before we move on. You have the very last stitch that you put on your needle, and then all the way down here is our very first stitch. We want to connect these two together. So we're going to swing all of these around in a circle so that they connect easily. And we'll just leave them on our table or your lap. It's easier on a flat surface. So you're going to take these top 3 needles and leave the bottom one right here without moving it. Just kind of put your hand down here and let these 3 needles swing around, and put the tip of the needle right next to this over the needle that's not moving. So we're just going to swing these around like that. Okay, and now we're not going to let the second needle move, and we're going to start turning these. Notice how the tip is going on top of the needle that's not moving. Okay, and now that you've got that one, we're just going to do the last one and continue turning. And now we have our very first stitch and our very last stitch together. Now we want to join those. So you're just going to rotate this whole thing so they're closer to you. All right, so I've got my tail here, and this is my working yarn. Let me go ahead and put my working yarn at the back, so this is coming up through the middle here. And we want to make sure that this first stitch and this one get connected. Go ahead and move your needle down a little bit so you can get that first point down here. And you can even these up by placing them right in the middle so they don't fall off. And take your free needle, this is your 5th one, and we're going to work this very first stitch and actually the second stitch while it's still laying here. And that will make these connect nice and snug without worry of these falling down. So we're going to go into the very first stitch here, okay? And then we're going to knit it. Just take your working yarn and wrap around to knit that stitch, and then pull a new stitch through, and then let the old one drop off. And it's very important, go ahead and tug on this yarn nice and snug so that it's really connected with that last stitch there. Go ahead and go into the next stitch and do the same thing again. I'm going to knit that second stitch and make sure it's nice and snug. So now this is not going anywhere. We just lift it up off the table. You see all these little sticks here. It looks a little bit of a mess, but really you want to just concentrate your attention on the two in hand. So the two needles in hand, you have your what was your free needle that all the new stitches are going to move on to, and then what you have is the working needle that you have all the stitches that you're working with right now. So you want to finish out this row, and you've already got this one connected. Let's go ahead and finish it. So just knit that next stitch and knit the next one, and you can keep going. Now for this particular pattern, we're going to do a rib stitch with a 2x2, so it's knit 2, purl 2. You can choose to knit the entire row first if you prefer that, or you can go ahead and knit 2, purl 2. I'm going to go backwards and show you if you want to do the purl 2 next here. So let's pull back. We're going to put, once we've done our first 2, we're going to put our yarn forward and purl 2. So yarn over and push that through to the back to purl, and do it again. Put that yarn, the yarn is in the front, put our stitch in there, put our needle in the front of that stitch, yarn over, push through to the back, and that's your purl stitch. So we've got knit 2, purl 2, put our yarn to the back, and continue that again. You've got a knit 2, purl 2. And because the stitches are placed on there with 8, it's really easy. You just got 2 repeats of that pattern, and you'll end on a purl 2. You see how I'm just concentrating on these other ones. I'm letting all these other needles just kind of fly around there. Okay, letting it go, and we have now an empty needle, okay? And you have this whole mess right here. Before we do anything else, I'm going to put this 5th needle down. I'm going to pick up my stitch marker. We're going to place it along this row, and you can put it towards the beginning of this needle. And that marks where the beginning of this round is. You can also tell from the tail that's hanging here, but this is a nice visual that this entire needle is the first part of your round. Now, before you move on, you do not continue knitting with the one that we have in our hand here. You need to start using this 5th needle, or the free needle. So if you were using only 4 double points, then you would have, this would be your 4th one. So we're going to pick up the empty needle and move it right here and go on to the next one that's connected. So this is the next needle. We're going to slide that down. And before I move on, I like to go ahead and put this needle right in the middle so that it's not going to fall off. And there's no stitches that are going to fall off in between. So now I'm just going to ignore this needle and put in my empty one into that very next stitch that occurs. So there's that next stitch. Put my yarn to the back because I was purling, and ignore all the other needles and just knit that stitch. Go ahead and make sure that your first and second stitch are nice and snug on there so that the round is connected nicely. So knitting 2. Okay, yarn forward and purl. And as you get used to knitting with double points, it actually is easier than it looks. It seems like a lot in your hands, but once you get used to it, your eyes tend to just focus on the 2 that you're working on at the same time, and the other ones really don't go anywhere. So knitting 2, purling 2, and you just continue rotating that that empty one around. So we'll do that again here in a second. Purling. Okay, we're rotating on to the next one. So when I move it around, I'm keeping the right side towards me, this middle part here. I'm not working it from the back. You want to make sure and not work from the inside here. You're working from the front. So this is the right side here, and you can also tell from putting your stitch marker on there. All right, so we're going to pick up our free needle, put it into the next stitch, move these all down, and continue working. Move that yarn to the back, and now we're just ignoring this other needle. Oops. There we go. Okay. Knit 2, purl 2 all the way around. Pause your video and I'll meet you back up if you need. I'm going to continue on this row so you can see it. You can look at your work like this, and you can see that you've got one full round. None of the stitches are twisted, and you are good to go to continue on. You can see that you're at the beginning of your round because of the tail, but also we've got this little stitch marker here, and it's just important to continue to make sure and be snug with that first stitch. You want your ribbing to be nice and even. So continue with round 2 through 11, just the same as round 1, and making that knit, purl, and you're going to make this little cuff here. And then when we get back, we'll start working on the body of the stitch with this PSSO 3 on here. All right, pause your video and I will see you in a moment. The next part of the pattern has the major stitch pattern, and it looks like these big yarn overs here, but what it is a PSSO 3, and all over this book you see really pretty stitch guides showing you exactly how you need to work the needles and these big arrows here. And there's also different figures on different pages that you can see, and even some videos that are available. So I want to point out that throughout the book there are several of these in here. Let's go over that now in the main body of the pattern. All right, we're ready for the body. I've got my ribbed cuff going on right here, and we're going to work on this section right here. These rounds 1 through 4 make up your main stitch pattern. So let's work round 1 and 2, and all those 2 rounds are doing is just knitting across all the stitches. So go ahead and do 2 rounds knitting. That's it. All right, pause your video and I'll meet you back up. All right, round 3, we're going to be reducing the amount of stitches by 8. So you've got 32 in the round, and we're going to be taking 2 stitches off each needle. We're going to slip as if to knit this first one, and then we knit 3, 1, 2, and 3. And then you're going to take that stitch that you had slipped before and just pass it over these 3 stitches. And then it puts this really big stitch in front, and that is your slip stitch. So that's PSSO 3, and then you just continue that on. You're going to slip as if to knit, just 1 stitch, and then knit until your stitches, there's no more left. Okay, 1, 2, and 3. And then pass that stitch over that you slipped all the way over, and you're just going to rotate it and go on to the next one, repeating across. Slip as if to knit, knit 3, pass the slip stitch over those 3. So 1, 2, 3, pass a slip stitch over, slip 1, knit 3, 2, 3, And pass that slip stitch over. A little tight. There we go. And you're just going to continue on around, and you'll have 24 stitches when you finish your round. Pause your video. I'll meet you back up for round 4. Round 4, you have made these PSSOs here, and now we want to increase our stitches back to 32. So we've got them down to 24. See that right there? And now we want to increase, so we're going to put yarn overs in. Take your empty needle for this very first stitch. It is a yarn over, and then we're going to just yarn over that empty needle and then insert it into our first stitch on this next needle. And when you wrap around, it locks in and creates that extra stitch there. And you're just going to knit those 3. So that's, again, knit 1, 2, 3. Then yarn over, just wrap that needle, and then knit 3. 1, 2, and 3. And then turn, and with the empty needle, do the same thing again. Just put it right in front of that next needle, yarn over, insert in, yarn over, and knit that stitch. And just continue around until you have the 32 stitches. You're at the beginning of the round. Pause your video and I'll meet you back. Now that you've completed the first 4 rounds, you can see your PSSO hanging out here, and you've got your little yarn overs just waiting for the next rounds. So you're going to work rounds 5 through 20, just like you did rounds 1 through 4, and you're just repeating it 4 times. So you've already done this part of the mitt, and then so you got 1 of these PSSOs, and you're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 more, and I'll meet you back right here where this thumb area is. Let's start this round together just so you can see. We've got this yarn over hanging out here, so that's not a mistake. Remember, you're going to want to work that so that you still have the 32 stitches. So just knit that as normal, just a regular knit stitch. It will be a little loose right now, and that's okay. And then knit those 3, 1, 2, 3, and then you've got that next, let's see, oh, there's that third one, sorry, 3, and then there's that next yarn over, knit that, and then just continue across. So rounds 1 through 2 are making the knit stitch, okay, which makes it build up, and then you've got the round where we're reducing, doing the PSSO, and then we're increasing, okay, so knitting 2 rounds, decreasing, and then increasing. Repeat rounds 1 through 4 4 more times, and I'll meet you back at this thumb hole. See you soon. All right, so we've got rounds 5 through 20 up to this point, and now we need to work the next 4 rounds, 21 through 24, to get to here. But what's significant here is we need to bind off some stitches and allow for this thumb hole opening. Now, we're not making the thumb part just yet, but we need to make sure that the inside here will allow a thumb to go through. So first thing is we're going to bind off the first 4 stitches on here. Now you have 6 stitches, you have 8 stitches across. Now 2 of them are yarn overs, so it may look a little bit different. Let's go ahead and bind off all 4 of these together, and then you're going to work the rest of the round just knitting. So we're going to knit that first yarn over and knit the second one, and then to bind off you just lift up and over for that first one and pass that over, and then knit the next one. And it may help to count them as you go. So we bound off 1, this is 2, 3, and 4, which is this yarn over here. So technically you've worked with 5 stitches, but the amount that you've bound off is less. So now I've got the 4 across, and you should have 4 total for this row because you had 8 before. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and then you've got this 4th one here. So just continue knitting across this whole round, and you're actually going to do that, so just complete round 21, and you'll have 28 stitches at the end of it. Pause your video and I'll meet you back up for round 22. See you soon. All right, round 22, this is where we've got those bound off stitches. We're on the beginning of our round, and we're going to yarn over twice here. So just put your needle here as you've done before with just 1 yarn over, except we're going to do it twice. So wrap it twice. It puts 2 stitches on here, and then knit the next stitch. So you're going to knit across this entire round, all stitches are knit. So you only have 30 stitches on here because we're only adding 2 more to this particular needle, and all the other needles will have 8. So continue knitting this round, pause your video, and I'll see you in a moment. For round 23, we're going to start by slipping the first part of this yarn over off, and we're going to knit front and back twice into this big loop here. So stick your free needle into that loop and yarn over to knit and pull up that stitch, and we're going to work in the back of this loop back here. Just kind of put the needle back there and yarn over and pull up a loop. Okay. And now we're going to go back into this same stitch here. So that's once. We're going to knit the stitch, yarn over, pull that stitch up and go to the back of that loop again and yarn over and pull up a stitch. So we actually have 4 loops on our needle, and then let that other one fall off. Stick your free needle into that loop and yarn over to knit and pull up that stitch. And we're going to work in the back of this loop back here. Just kind of put the needle back there. And yarn over and pull up a loop. And now we're going to go back into this same stitch here. So that's once. We're going to knit the stitch. Pull that stitch up and go to the back of that loop again and yarn over and pull up a stitch. So we actually have 4 loops on our needle, and then let that other one fall off. And then we want to go to the next stitch, and we're going to slip as if to knit, and then knit these last 3 stitches, and we're doing that PSSO3. So we're going to knit 1, 2, 3, and then lift that first stitch up and over. And the rest of this is just like when you do a round 3 that you did earlier. Okay, so you're just going to continue by slipping 1 and knitting 3, PSSO3 for the remainder of this round. All right, pause your video and I will meet you back up for the next round, round 24. See you soon. Before round 24 starts, you should have completed and had 25 stitches. So double check all your numbers and make sure you have 25 stitches around your needles. This first one will have 7 on it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the rest of them have 6 needles. The first 4 stitches on round 24 are knit. Just knit those first 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for the remainder of the round, you're just going to do like you did originally in round 4, which is yarn over and then knit 3. And then you just repeat all the way around. Okay, so for round 24, just continue working that way. And then rounds 25 through 30, you're going to repeat rounds 1 through 4 once more, and then rounds 1 and 2 once more. So you'll end with 2 more rounds of knitting. And then you'll move on to a top ribbing section. So you're going to complete, you've just completed this part here, and you're going to do 1 more and then finish with 2 rounds of the knitting, and then you're going to work rounds 1 through 6 and doing the top ribbing. Go ahead and pause your video and meet me back up when you get to this section here, and we will bind off in pattern, and then later we're going to work the thumb area for you. All right, see you soon. All right, so we've worked our remaining rounds here, and we've done our top ribbing 1 through 6, and now we're going to need to bind off all stitches loosely in ribbing. Another way to say that is to bind off in pattern, and that's when you knit the knits and purl the purls. Let's do that together. All right, we're going to bind off all these stitches loosely. Go ahead and knit the first 2 and lift the first one up and over the second. And when you get onto the 3rd stitch, put your yarn forward And you're going to purl, because that is a purl stitch. We're going to purl the pearls and put our yarn to the back again and lift up and over. You can leave this yarn forward because the next stitch is a purl, but I like moving the yarn out of the way. It's just easier for me to do. I move the yarn out of the way and lift up and over. And I'm not pulling extra tight on this. I want there to be a generous opening. And now that I have my yarn to the back, I'm going to go ahead and knit the next stitch. Lift up and over. Knit the next stitch. Lift up and over. That binds that off. And then the next 2 stitches are purl. Bind that off. Oh, dropped one. And then purl that stitch. All right. Lift up and over. Okay, and then you've got this needle that you don't need to do anything with, so it's done for the moment. Set it aside and put the yarn to the back, and then when you move on to the next needle, you're going to knit this stitch, and now you can bind off that last stitch from the last 8 stitches. So now you bound that off. Go to the next one, knit, and lift over, and now we're going to purl, and you just continue just like that. And you can see how it's nice and even and retains that stretchy and looseness. And we'll just go all the way around. Pause your video. I'll meet you back up for the end here. And we'll work on the thumb hole section together. See you soon. All right, we've come to the end. I've gone ahead and clipped my yarn. I'm just going to yarn over and pull through one more. Last stitch. And then now we can connect these 2 pieces here just with a tapestry needle. I'm going to come through these 2 stitches in this little chain here from the inside out like that, and then I'm going to come through these 2 from where it ended, these 2 here, and I'm going to make a chain. See how it draws it in and makes a little chain right here, and then that completes that. I'm going to come over here, and now I can just weave in into the back of this ribbing here. All right, so finish weaving in your tail here, weave in this tail here, and then when we meet back up, we're going to work on the thumb. For the thumb section, with the right side facing, pick up 12 stitches evenly spaced around the thumb opening. So I've bent this, you can see where my thumb opening is right here. And we're going to be picking up stitches evenly around to shape this thumb here. There's a really nice clean figure on page 47, and you can see that when you have this book, and it's also got some more tips for you, including using a crochet hook if you're having a hard time pulling through some of those stitches. And then you're going to place 3 stitches on each of the 4 needles, and we'll work all the way around in the ribbing just as you've done before, and bind off and pattern loosely in the ribbing just as we did before. But right now, let's just pick up these stitches and you'll be able to get the rest of it. I'm going to come up to here, and you see how around this opening we have a couple of yarn overs. Avoid those areas as much as possible, and you want to pick up stitches along where you can get through 2 stitches. So you want to go underneath and pick up a stitch like that. So grab your yarn, and then you're going to pull up a stitch, and this first one might be easier with a crochet hook. And see, I'm kind of bending it back and I can get it, but let's look what it looks like with a crochet hook. So I'm going to put my hook right underneath this V-stitch. It's kind of shaped like that, little chain, and just pull it right on up, okay? And then you can put it on your needle, okay? You can leave a nice long tail that you can sew in that later if it's easier. And now we're going to go through the next one and pick up another stitch. And that's a little tighter, so I'm just going to hold that to the side, and we'll use our crochet hook here. And then yarn over and pull through. And that's a little bit easier, and then we can just leave that loose, pick that up with our needle, and move on to the next one. Yarn over and pull up a loop here. And put that through our needle. Okay, and now I've got 3 on this needle. We're going to just drop it and go onto the next needle and just keep working our way around. And you want to make sure that you are definitely not on one of those yarn overs. You want to make sure that it's a nice firm connection here. Okay, so I'm going to keep rotating and turning around. We're not going to go on the inside. All right, so I've got a yarn over here. Before I get to the yarn over, let me go through this stitch here next to it, pull one up, and we'll put that in our next needle. And then skip this big yarn over area here. And in fact, yeah, here we go. Go through these 2 stitches, pull up a loop, place it on our needle, and move on to the next one. That's that one. And then I'm going to go through this one. Just make sure you got 2 stitches on top of it and place it. All right, so I've got half of my stitches. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Moving on, and I can go ahead and tuck this little strand down in here, and then you can weave that in afterward. Just get it out of the way. Go ahead and pick up 3 more. And then I have this other yarn over here, and then there's a stitch down here. I can go ahead and just pick those up and work those together, just as long as it's got another stitch with it. Just 1, 2 stitches, pull that up. I normally don't use a crochet hook, but this is actually much easier for me. Okay, keep turning, find another pair of stitches. There we go. Okay, and it's a little tight. I'm just going to keep rotating around, grabbing our last needle, and we want to get 3 stitches in here. One, 2, pull up, loop. Place that on there. And then right where I had my first bind off stitches here, I've actually got 2 more loops that I can go under. It looks like the beginning chain of that one. So that works out really well. And then place that on my needles. And yes, it is a very tight little space for your thumb hole. And we know that this is the beginning of our round, so I'm going to go ahead and take my little stitch marker off and put it right here, so I know that this is the beginning of my round. Okay, got my working yarn coming out from here. It's a great way to tell. And just pick up your 5th needle, and remember, just ignore the ones you're not working with. So I'm only working with this empty one and then this one here, and we're just going to knit 2 and then purl 2, and that first stitch is really loose. I'm going to come back up in here and grab that tail and kind of tug on it. That's that tail from the beginning. And then now we're going to purl 2. So you'll have to kind of talk your way through this one, because one of the purls is on this needle and then the next one is on the next needle. And there's my purl 2. And then the next 2 stitches are knit. And I have this seated the wrong way. If you see how I have it this way, we want the leg of the stitch with the right side over the needle. to insert it the correct way, or else that stitch is going to get twisted. So we just situate it correctly. And this one I need to do that too. I think it's easier when you're picking up the stitches just to fix it afterwards. So we're just going to knit this one and then go on to the next. And it's seated the wrong way, so I'm going to fix it before I move on. There we go. And this one is purl. Oops. Golly, I'm getting this all messed up. Okay, yarn forward. Put the needle into purl. Purl that stitch. So purl. I'm going to twist this one around. Purl. And knit. One. And I've dropped it. So hold on. It just barely fell out. So I'm going to pick these stitches up here. This should be fine. There we go. And then the last stitches are, see, I just knit that one, and then I have a knit. And then 2 purl. The first row is obviously, it's a lot more fiddly. So once I get this round done, I will continue on, and then we have 3 more rounds. So it's actually rounds 1 through 4 is ribbing. Okay. So rounds 1 through 4 are ribbing, knit 2, purl 2, and then bind off all the stitches in the round just like we did up here, and then you will be finished with it. So I'll pause my video, we'll come back and we'll have both of them done. Well, here are my final mitts. Aren't they so cute with the completed thumb hole? I just adore them. I think my sister's gonna love these. And if you want to try this with circular needles, you can totally do that, or even use 2 circulars next to each other and working this as well. So there's multiple ways to knitting in the round. Be sure and pick up your beginner's guide to knitting in the round. Thank you so much to Leisure Arts for your permission and pattern reading and this opportunity to learn. Be sure and check out our videos. We have a new one every week. Subscribe to our channel and just pictures on Instagram at GoodKnit Kisses, and we'd love to feature them. Thanks for joining us today, where we help you stitch your love and love your stitches. See you again soon.